Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Sometimes doing exactly what the boss told you can be a big problem for the company. You'll understand why after our first story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. You want me to save the company $34 million a year? I'll do just that and get you fired. This is a story that's somewhat legendary around my mine site that I work at. One of the big bosses, we'll call him BB around the site, decided to be a smart bud one day and instructed someone a level below him, we'll call him AA, to save the mine $34 million a year. Here's what's important. BB said he didn't care how he did it. He told AA to just get it done or else he'd make sure they'd lose their job. Now, AA had been putting up with crap from this BB for the past few months. There's a code of conduct and responsibility that needs to be followed, and BB worked very hard to find his way through every loophole possible that stopped him from slacking off. This includes dumping a fair amount of extra work into his employees, but the one in this tale of ProRevenge had it the worst. BB would constantly belittle AA on the mine radios, dump extra paperwork on him, including BB's own paperwork, make him drive other employees around the mine site when AA was already swamped with extra paperwork, causing him to lag behind in his other duties that he was supposed to be doing. AA was no assistant. It was not his job to do BB's crap, and if he refused, BB technically could start the process of AA's termination through some bullcrap loophole. So here's where it gets interesting. After BB instructed AA to save the mine $34 million a year, AA figured out damn well that BB was trying to kiss the butt of the higher-ups and make himself look good. However, instead of doing the work himself, he once again dumped it onto AA. And AA had had enough. BB has his designated time off and comes back to find a massive, and I mean massive, this thing is one of the biggest production movers on site, conveyor line, parked up miles away from where it's supposed to be operating and in the equipment graveyard. If you've seen a conveyor line, think if a crane and a conveyor belt had an enormous love child. It has been disassembled and sits in 3 enormous pieces. BB flies off the handle, he explodes, he gets onto the mine radios and screams for AA to get his butt down there. AA rocks up, and when asked what in the hell he'd done, AA simply shrugs and says, "I pulled the conveyor out of production. It saves you $34 million a year." No matter what BB argued or how much he threatened, AA simply said, "You told me to save $34 million a year. I did just that." No matter how much money the mine would actually lose with this massive machine out of construction, AA did as he was told. Of course, the big bosses found out, and when they questioned BB about it, he pointed the blame on AA. Once again, AA stood his ground and said that he did as he was told. Once BB confirmed what he had instructed AA to do, it wasn't long before BB was sacked. He packed his stuff and walked out of the gate that same day. AA still happily remains, stress-free, and not to be effed with. Sounds like the really big boss didn't like BB already. People notice more than someone like BB thinks. The really big boss finally had an excuse to put the knife in. And our next story. You aren't responsible for damage because there isn't a fence or curb? Okay. I have a family that runs a multi-unit rental property. On that property is a storm grate that doesn't belong to the city. It sits off the driveway to one side along a graveled border. It was fine for many years, but the local garbage trucks changed their route or something and began to use that spot to turn around. That would be fine, except they kept backing over the storm drain, caving in the metal grate that covers it. It didn't always fail, but often it would be deformed enough for someone's leg to fit through the gap. It costs about $300 for the steel to it, and the maintenance guy had to get help replacing the thing every time due to the weight. And there is the danger that someone could get hurt. Not good. The company that owns the trucks was contacted multiple times, and they always denied any responsibility. One of those times, they said that even if they had done it, there was no curb or anything blocking the gravel, so they wouldn't be liable for damage anyway. That's where I come in. A few years ago, I got tired of paying people to haul some of my equipment around for me, so I bought a big old 5-ton truck. I also own an elderly forklift. You can probably see where this is going. I was told what was happening and asked if I could pick up a 4,200-pound concrete retaining wall block, set it up in front of that grate. How could I say no? So on my next day off work, I picked up one made of red concrete, TIL, they can put dye in concrete when they mix it. I brought it back and used my old forklift to unload it and set it up. Within a couple of weeks, the block had a chip out of one corner and had been shoved out of position by almost a foot. When I showed up to put it back in place, I was pleased to see a big streak the color of the local garbage truck scraped into it. I put it back in place, and so far it hasn't budged. I know it didn't do more than scrub a little paint off the garbage truck, but I'm sure it gave the driver of that truck a bad moment. The new curb hasn't budged since. Perfect. Modern problems require modern solutions. And our next story. Supervisor causes worker to quit due to asinine logic. My first job after I graduated high school was working at a grocery store. Part-time, minimum wage, no benefits, crap schedule. This story happened before I started college, in the fall, so I had only time to work and make money. This story is 7 years old. While I was there was a period of some people quitting, and they struggled to get more employees to fill the gap. I wanted more hours, and I went from 16 hours to 28 to 32 hours a week. My schedule was clear, and I had nothing to do besides work, and I definitely wanted drinking money for when I got to college later. At that wage, it still wasn't enough, so I figured I'd look for a second job. As soon as I landed a job that was full-time, Coca-Cola distributor, and told my supervisor that I got a second job and I could only work certain hours and days since I would be working elsewhere, typical weekdays with overtime occasionally, there was plenty of shift times to accommodate the change, and I was mostly working night shifts and weekends at the grocery store. This was fine for the first week, until there was a schedule conflict on one of the shifts, and I told my supervisor I was unable to work a shift due to my other job, and I needed them to switch the shift with someone else. Supervisor countered my request, stating that they refused to work around another job schedule and was concerned I would be working too much at a young age, so they told me I could not work both jobs. I quit on the spot with no notice given because I was already working 2 jobs and unable to work at both, according to her. Her reaction was that I could absolutely not just quit and that I had to give 2 weeks' notice. My response: you told me I could not work both jobs, and I have to work there next Tuesday when you scheduled me. So no, I don't think I will. Good for you for pushing back on the whole "you have to give 2 weeks' notice" nonsense. F 'em. And our last story. Dishonest neighbor finds himself unable to sell his house. Years ago, my neighbor was trying to sell his house during the fall, and he was selling it for incredibly more than it was worth, almost 6 figures higher. To make the property seem worth that figure, he would wake up early in the morning and take a leaf blower and blow the leaves past his front lawn into our backyard, and then some, making it seem like his front yard went all the way to our driveway and also included our beautiful tree, older than all the homes in the area combined. We never had a backyard fence because his kids were my age and we'd all play on the swing attached to that tree together. We were all cool. My dad wasn't too keen on this because he didn't want to get in a property dispute with the new owner, so he found the official property lines, and guess what? His front lawn ended about 3 feet from his house. So my dad bought some little stakes with orange ribbons and hammered them into the ground to show where the actual property line was. Next day they were gone, thrown into the woods that surround us. My dad fetched them, nailed them back in, and knocked on the door asking him to cut the crap. Next day, gone once again with a passive-aggressive note on our door. My dad is a rather intimidating guy when frustrated, and he was apparently too scared to be confrontational, saying we need to just be cool with it and let him do his scam so he can sell the house. My dad then decided to up the ante and went to a hardware store and bought 4 12-foot iron rods, took out his ladder, and used the backside of an axe to nail it about 8 to 9 feet into the ground, then watered the grass or did something so it couldn't just be yanked right out. Now there were just 4 ugly rods poking out of the lawn with bright orange ribbon tied to the top. My family goes away for a weekend, came back Monday, and all 4 are gone, tossed into the woods, and our backyard in those 4 spots are trashed with little holes from where he spent hopefully a long time digging those bad boys up. Obviously, my dad was furious, and he just silently stood there for about 20 minutes with a burning rage deep inside, and our entire family could hear him scheming. He turned around, hopped back in the car, and disappeared for hours, only to return with a tow truck coming behind him. He popped over to a junkyard, found essentially a frame of a car, and bought it for its worth in metal, then had it shipped to his backyard, which he plopped just before that property line. My dad walked into our house like a great conqueror, saying, "Let's see him throw that into the woods." The neighbors showed up later that afternoon, followed by prospective buyers who just stood in his driveway, gawking at the junker 4 feet from the house. He tried to brush it off, and as soon as they left, he came over just yelling about how he's going to call the cops on us and home association for depreciating the value of his property, which my dad said, "Sure, go ahead. I'll let him know about what you've been pulling for the past few weeks." Eventually, they came to the agreement that the junker would leave the yard if he paid to have it removed and shipped away, and ever since, he stopped messing with the yard and stopped messing with the leaves. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.